Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Just move this over here. The case that I'm going to be talking about today is the disturbing case of Mark Twitchell, who was inspired by the TV show Dexter. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it or watched it. I watched it. I found it brilliant myself. Did it inspire me to go and murder someone? No, definitely not. I saw this case doing a suggestion of someone else's and I found it really interesting. The fact that they were inspired by a TV show, which is just insane. So yeah, I hope you guys find it as interesting as I did. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. I will look into them for you. Mark Andrew Twitchell was born on the 4th of July in 1979 in Edmonton, Canada. I do not know his parents' names. I couldn't find them anywhere. I also couldn't find anything about his childhood. But it seems that he came from a well-adjusted family. Apparently, as I've said, not much is known about it, just that, I guess. I believe he spent a lot of time in his youth in the Midwest. And then in the late 1990s, he goes back to Canada, where he takes a course on TV and radio. This was at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. He graduated from there in 1999. His friends remember him as having he had quite a close-knit group of friends, but he was also a loner. So I guess he had those people that he liked, and that was it. And you know, the rest of the time he just liked his own company. One of his closer friends was called Drew Kenworthy, who said that he was a good guy, but he was not very trustworthy, like, at all. He would lie a lot about things that didn't even really need to be lied about. He would not pull his weight as well. So say you had a joint project that you had to do in school or college or something like that, and you both have to do certain aspects of it. He wouldn't do his aspect of it. He just wouldn't do it at all. He would leave all the work to the other person, and then when asked why he hadn't done it, he would just lie about it and just make up excuses about it all. And that was just the kind of person that he was. At some point in his life, he lived in the US for a few years. And on the 4th of January in 2001, he married a woman from Illinois. Their marriage lasted a few years, and in 2004, they got divorced. In 2005, he actually met a woman on a dating website, and they continued to talk for quite a few years before he married her in January of 2007. They moved back to Canada in 2008 after his second marriage, and she was pregnant. They had a daughter together in that same year. He did a few different jobs in sales back in Canada, but what he really wanted to do was be in film productions and work in things like that. And so he decided that he was going to make a fan film on Star Wars, which was something that he really loved. He loved Star Wars. He filmed Star Wars Secrets of the Rebellion, and it was mostly done with a green screen and these artists that he's found being used as actors. It actually gained a lot of online attention, and he was on local news because of it as well. He then begins his next project called Day Players, and he managed to convince investors to finance his project, probably because of the buzz he got from the first one. He also really enjoyed creating detailed fantasy costumes. Then, in 2006, a TV show called Dexter appears about a serial killer who worked within the police, and he would only try and kill bad people, essentially. Mark would become obsessed with the character Dexter, and he would watch all of the episodes. He absolutely loves the show. In September of 2008, inspired by Dexter, he wrote and directed an 8-minute-long horror film called House of Cards. He did it in this garage that he'd rented in the south end of Edmonton. The story was about a killer who lured a man to his garage using online dating. So pretending to be a woman, catfishing essentially, and bringing them back to the garage and murdering him. It seems like after this, he wanted to be like his favourite character. He had this revelation. He wanted to be exactly like Dexter Morgan and become a serial killer. I mean, he didn't really capture Dexter very well because, yeah, as I've already said, Dexter only tried to kill bad people. So, yeah, he didn't really get that right, as you will see. He came up with a plan. He went on dating website Plenty of Fish, and he made an account for a desirable young woman called Chyna. It didn't take long before Giles Tetrault, I mean, I'm sorry, I've probably butchered that name. But as you guys know, I'm useless, so yeah. Anyway, they became friends. They wanted to meet up, like you normally do after a while of talking on a dating website. And Sheena convinced him to pick her up for a date at this garage on the 3rd of October in 2008. As Giles entered the garage, it was dark, and I believe the door was only slightly open, so he crouches down, he goes into the darkened garage, which is set up like Dexter's kill room. And if you don't know what Dexter's kill room is, here's an example. He attacked him with a stun baton wearing a hockey mask. He then took out a gun and pointed it at Giles, ordered him to the ground and put duct tape on his eyes. While Giles was on the ground, he decided that if he was going to die, he would rather go out his own way. So he jumps up, he rips the duct tape off his eyes, and then he grabs his attacker's gun. And that was when he discovered that it was actually made of plastic. After a violent struggle, Giles manages to get out of the garage. He ran into the alleyway behind it at this intersection and he collapsed on the floor. His legs are like jelly, I guess, because of the stun baton and the fight that he's just had. And he falls in front of this couple that are out for a walk. Now, Giles asks for them for help, but Mark obviously comes out behind him and he's pretending that this is all some sort of play and they're just messing around. And the couple actually think that it's part of some mugging scheme and they just walk off for their own safety. They didn't realise that he was actually being attacked. Luckily though, he managed to get in his car and he drove off. He never informed the police because he felt like he felt really embarrassed that he had been made a fool of, in a sense, in that way, and he just convinced himself that it wasn't as serious as he thought it was. The really sad thing here is not that Giles knew at all and could foresee it, but 1 week later, his next victim would not be so lucky and would not escape. Giles was so lucky to escape. If he hadn't grabbed hold of that gun and realised it was plastic, he probably would have been his first victim. So he is so lucky. So, Mark Twitchell then picks up 38-year-old John Brian Altinger, who was also known as Johnny a lot, so that may be how I refer to him through this video. It was on the same website, Plenty of Fish, and this was going to be his next victim. This time he made a profile calling himself Jen, as a woman obviously, and Jen and Johnny began talking, and here is an example of an email that Jen sent to Johnny. On the 10th of October 2008, he had convinced John to come over to his garage. Before he came though, John told his friends that he was going meeting a girl he had been chatting with online. He even sent the directions that he had received to a couple of his friends, you know, making sure that people knew exactly where he was in case anything happened. The unfortunate thing was that in this case, it helped him after to find out who had done this, but obviously it didn't prevent him becoming the next victim, which is really sad. As soon as John entered the garage, which again was set up like Dexter's kill room, he had this big heavy metal table in the middle that was, the whole room was full of plastic to try and capture blood spatter and things like that. Mark jumped on Johnny and brutally bludgeoned him. He then proceeded to stab him with a knife. He murdered him, dismembered his body, did other things to him which I'm not going to talk about because it's pretty sick, and then he tried to burn him. When that didn't work, he dumped the rest of the remains into, well, he put them in garbage bags and then he put it in a storm sewer not far from where he lived. After he murdered John, he wrote down the gory details of exactly how he had done it and what he had done in this file that he called My Progression as a Serial Killer, or SK Confessions, so serial killer confessions. And I mean, that would come in pretty handy later on. Not very smart on his part to do that, but very handy for the police to do that. So when Johnny didn't come home, people began to become worried. Not only that, they received this email, apparently from Johnny. It wasn't at all written like Johnny would write it, but he went on to say about how he had met Jen and how Jen was going to take him away to Costa Rica and they were going to be gone for months, etc, etc. But it wasn't written how Johnny would have written it at all, and so they were suspicious, rightly so. At work, they received a resignation letter from Johnny that didn't sound like him again. It didn't provide a forwarding postal address for his final paycheck, which again is weird. So because his friends were worried and they were suspicious as to what on earth was going on, they broke into his condominium. And inside they found that it didn't look like he had packed for any trip whatsoever. There were dirty dishes in the apartment, like he was gonna come back and obviously sort it out. You don't normally go away on holiday leaving your house in a mess kind of thing. You normally like to clean it up and have it all nice and tidy for when you get back. Not only that, one of the major things that was there was his passport. So yeah, he ain't going nowhere abroad without his passport. And yet there it was in his house. Of course, they went on to call the police. As I've said before, there were lots of emails between Johnny and his friends telling them what he was doing, where he was going. There was the text messages of the directions, which the police recovered and followed, and it led them to Mark Twitchell's garage that he had rented. He claimed that he had no idea who Jen was or who Johnny Altringer was, and initially they didn't think he was a suspect at all, until he began with a silly, unbelievable story that put him under suspicion straight away. So he started going on about a man that he had met that had sold him this red Mazda for $40, which hilariously the car was worth about $10,000. So why someone would sell it for $40 is just ridiculous, and that is why the story was just so silly, because he is one lucky guy for getting that car for peanuts when it is worth so much money. Anyway, they actually happened to be looking for Johnny's red Mazda, and he's just putting the information out on a platter and giving it to him. They basically brought him in for interviews and stuff. He denied it all, and you know, they put him under surveillance because they knew he had something to do with Johnny going missing. On the 23rd of October, he sends out this email to his friends and film crew urging them not to speak to the police. On the 31st of October in 2008, Mark Twitchell was arrested whilst he was in the basement of his parents' house. He was busily making an Iron Man costume. They had gotten word that blood found in Mark's car belonged to Johnny Altringer. On the same day, he was charged with first-degree murder. Now, one of the key pieces of evidence that was shown at the trial was, you guessed it, SK Confessions. The document in which he detailed the entire act of everything that he did and thought. He had tried to delete it, but, you know, it was recovered regardless, so he tried. He really tried, but he wasn't successful. They also found a yellow sticky note stuck in his car that said, "Clean up the kill room." Super smart. A search of his Facebook revealed that he was fully obsessed with Dexter, and the police, in an attempt to find out who his first victim was, because he'd also written about him, released some information on SK Confessions to the public to try and sort of flush out the first victim, which it did work. Giles did come forward, and his story matched perfectly to the person in his confessions who he referred to as Frank. He would proclaim his innocence and pretend that he had nothing to do with it. It took literally 2 years for them to find Johnny's body, because in 2010, he finally gave the police a hand-drawn trail map highlighting the location of John's body. His trial would attract wide attention, and the international press just crowded around the courtroom to try and gather details on this really, really strange and unique story. At the trial, he did confess to murder, but he basically said that it was in self-defense, that he had lured Johnny into his obviously set, that he was going to write about it in a book, and it was to promote his film that he had created of exactly the same thing, bearing in mind, and it would basically create a buzz for it. Apparently, according to Mark, you know, Johnny was not happy that Jen was not real, that he had been lured in there under false pretenses, and they got into a fight. He then eventually hit Johnny over the head with a pipe, and then he stabbed him in self-defense because he was protecting himself against the man who was laid on the floor with a crushed in skull. He had to stab him because, you know, he might get back up and I don't know, attack him again, I guess, even though his skull is crushed. Okay, Mark. As you can guess, it didn't fly. And eventually, on the 12th of April in 2011, Mark Twitchell was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for at least 25 years for the murder of John Altinger. And his family and friends sided with the prosecution. Another document that Mark had written wasn't actually shown at trial because it was deemed too inflammatory, was called Profile of a Psychopath. And it was basically about himself. It's 7 pages long, so you can read the entire thing if you want to. It's not that long, but I'm just going to select a few passages out of it and put them in the video, so you can just get an insight into Mark's mind. Also, if you guys are interested, he's now on a dating website for inmates. So yeah, if you're interested in Mark Twitchell, the wannabe Dexter serial killer who was caught before he managed to become a serial killer, thank goodness, of course, then yeah, you can go on his profile. And I'll even show it you on screen now so you can read a little bit about it. If he ever gets out and he ever does get a relationship with someone, I certainly would not be going back to his house alone, that's for sure. So yeah, that is the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you want to join the pack, and if you are a regular, I appreciate you guys so much. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Mark Twitchell. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.